Hello! So today we're going to examine the question of how can a viewer or spectator identify with a non-human subject or character, and how might cinematic techniques aid in this identification? Before we try to answer that, let's define a few important terms: identification and non-human subject. In psychoanalysis, identification is the process or phenomenon in which the spectator or viewer associates themselves with a character, aspect, or element of the film. For the late French film theorist Christian Metz, the pleasure of cinema is found in this identification, but we'll come back to that. A non-human subject or character is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. A figure, whether it be the environment, a plant, an inanimate object, an animal, like the one here, who does not want to be on camera, that is centered in a film. Today we're going to look at the latter, an animal subject. So, to return to the question, how can the viewer identify with non-human subjects or characters? I would like to also add, can we do this without anthropomorphizing said subjects? Anthropomorphism is the attribution of human characteristics to a non-human being. To start to answer this, we first have to return to Metz. In Chapter 3, Identification Mirror, of his 1977 book, The Imaginary Signifier, Psychoanalysis in the Cinema, he argues that there are two forms of identification in film. Primary identification, in which the viewer identifies with the camera, and secondary identification, in which the viewer identifies with a character. Of course, here he means a human character. But what if we expanded this idea? What if character could include non-human beings? This brings us to Cristobal Escobar and Barbara Creed's 2024 essay, Becoming Non-Human. In it, they cite French filmmaker and critic Jean Epstein's idea of the photohenie, which describes the capacity of the mechanical medium, the camera, to animate objects, animals, plants, people, and places in a manner that enhances the viewer's sensorium. They go on to argue that cinema animates the world, bringing its non-human life into light. So, in essence, just by filming the world, it possesses a newfound significance or importance. Their idea of the camera being able to animate non-human life is important to my argument. How can a camera animate, say, a horse? Well, why don't we find out? What follows is the opening sequence of Hungarian director Béla Tarr's 2011 The Turin Horse. The scene immediately before this consists of a voiceover narration of the apocryphal story of the end of Nietzsche's life. The narration ends with, "Of the horse, we know nothing." Let's watch the tail end of the voiceover, mostly because I think it's tonally important to our understanding of the scene. During this opening, pay attention to the framing of the horse and the camera movements.
Az óriás termettű dúsbajuszú úr ugyanis váratlanul a kocsihoz ugrik, és zokogva a ló nyakába borul. Házigazdája viszi haza. 2 napig mozdulatlanul és némán fekszik egy heverőn, míg kimondja a kötelező utolsó szavakat. Mutter, ich bin dumm. Aztán szelíd háborodottként anyjas nővérei felügyelete alatt még 10 évig él. Hogy a lóval mi lett, nem tudjuk.
Okay, a lot to digest. What I find crucial here, which I believe plays into this notion of the photohenie, is the way the horse is framed. The horse is the very first thing we see on camera. As the scene progresses, the camera oscillates between medium and medium long shots, again primarily centering the horse. The camera at times tracks under the horse, so the viewer is looking up at the horse from this low angle. The camera eventually comes to the side of the horse in a long shot of both the man and the horse. It slowly travels back to just the man, who is framed similarly to how the horse was, a low-angle frame. I say frame because, as we can see, this is one continuous long shot. Anyhow, by individually framing the man and the horse in the same fashion, it seems as though the camera sees man and horse as equals. Human and non-human subjects are, in this instance, treated as one and the same. That is, until the camera dollies back to the horse, where we largely remain for the next 3 or so minutes. In many frames, both man and horse are present, but the horse takes up a significantly larger portion of the frame than her human counterpart. Alright, this is all fine and dandy, but where does the identification come in? Well, I'm arguing that, in prioritizing the horse in the frame, the film allows the audience to identify with the horse as a non-human being. Though we have no way of knowing what the horse is thinking, that does not necessarily stop us from identifying with this non-human character. We watch as she pulls the carriage through the windstorm, and the camera animates her in such a way that, without having access to her interiority, we still sympathize with her. We see how strenuous this is, her wet fur, the billowing winds. The score, I believe, also aids in this, but that's for another video. It's important to emphasize the sympathy we feel for the horse, not to be mistaken with empathy. As humans, there's no way that we can know exactly what the horse is feeling, and there's no way to put ourselves in her shoes. The film does not try to do this by avoiding choices like voiceover narration or cutting back and forth between the man and the horse to try to read his emotion onto her. The film evades anthropomorphizing her. She exists as horse, not human as horse. I know this idea is kind of strange, identifying with a being that we are fundamentally incapable of fully knowing their emotions, but the sympathetic gaze feels for the horse and pays close attention to her, thus allowing us to identify with her. Because of this, I argue that yes, we can identify with non-human subjects, and it can be facilitated through things like camera movement and framing, as we see in the Turin horse. If I had more time, I would love to go into if and how we can identify with non-human characters such as environments or plants or inanimate objects, but that's for another day. Thank you.